This sprawling mansion is being restored with great care because underneath it is thought to lie a medieval hospital. But that might just be the start of it. The owners called in our very own Mick Aston, who stumbled across something rather surprising in the garden. So the fact that we're here is all down to you?
Yeah, I'm afraid it is, actually. I was asked to come here and look at this building and then wandered off and looked at the grounds around it. Thought it was really interesting and we ought to come back and do more work.
I bet you're great to employ. You were asked to look at this fantastic place and you're poking around the back.
Yeah, well, there's a medieval hospital on the site, but up on the hill at the back, we found 10th century pottery.
So that's Anglo-Saxon?
Yeah.
When you say you found it, where was it?
It was in the vegetable patch on the top of the hill, but it's earlier than the date of the town of Burford when that's found in the 12th century. So there's something here that much earlier.
And finding that was sufficiently exciting for you to come to us and say, I really want to dig it. So, medieval hospital or Anglo-Saxon settlement? It looks like Mick's got us looking for both in this massive garden. That's over 1,000 years of history to sort out. At least our search for the hospital should be fairly straightforward. Fingers crossed, John's radar has picked up part of it under the front lawn. It means we can put in our first trench straight away. This should be a dodger, shouldn't it?
Barry, look at that, hopeless.
Oh dear, the first cut is the hardest.
Typical, isn't it? Mick Aston comes here, he finds Saxon pottery. What do I find? White china. Oh well.
Stop moaning, Phil, you've got the easy job. Our second target is the vegetable garden, and it's going to be a lot harder. This is where Mick found his mysterious Anglo-Saxon pottery, and he wants us to scour it for more. It's not exactly small, so we've called in some extra help.
More people up here.
But organising his class proves a little difficult for archaeologist Professor Dumbledore.
So each group of 3 go to a tray.
Just put it back where you found it.
Oh, well,
for
that's
now.
the best way. Put your arms around each other. And then
don't start digging yet. Don't start
Teresa.
digging yet. You're all right. That's right. Leave that where it is.
Teresa.
Come on, Phil.
That's another one on the same alignment, look.
So that's 3. That dates to about the time of William the Conqueror. So that's really, 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 really old. So that's great. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, you've been doing this for about 10 minutes, have you? Something like that?
Got another one.
4.
In a line.
So, young time team 47, professional archaeologists 4. Phil's in danger of being outdug by a bunch of 9-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
Our young diggers have now found so much late Saxon pottery that we can plot it all on a map. We're going to put in a trench where there's a hot spot. So we say cheerio to one team.
Bye. Bye.
And say hello to another.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Mick, alarm bells are ringing in my mind. If we were looking for the medieval hospital, fine. If we were looking for a Saxon burr, fingers crossed, maybe we would find it. But this seems to me to be much more scattergun. Surely what we ought to be doing in archaeology is either proving something or disproving it.
Well, yes, you could look at it like that, but it's actually more of an evaluation of what is a very big garden. You see, part of the problem, I think, is that with a lot of archaeological work, we dig because we know or we think there's something there of a certain date. There's actually stuff all over the place.
Yes, but will we get a story?
I think it's worth seeing how many periods of occupation we've got represented here. So, you know, I'd like to try this with what is, after all, a big garden. I mean, it's a bigger version of thousands of gardens.
That's stretching it a bit, Mick. This place is huge. Over on the front lawn, Phil's row of stones has turned into the corner of a large wall, which lines up perfectly with the geophysics. Could this be our medieval hospital? Well, some 13th century hospitals could be very big, But most had two main buildings, a long infirmary hall for the sick and a chapel, either on the end or on the side. So which one does Phil have?
You can't tell whether you're outside or inside there, can you?
Oh, surely I must be inside. I mean, that's got to be an outside wall, or at least part of an outside wall, and then turning round and going round there. I'm sure that must be outside, and I'm on the inside.
And just to prove Phil doesn't make this stuff up, look at this lovely floor tile. It must mean we're inside a building.
This is exactly the sort of thing you'd expect to find in a very posh 13th,
Yes.
14th century
Yes,
building.
it is, isn't it?
Like
Yeah.
a chapel.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So this could be one of our hospital buildings, the chapel. And the second, the hall, might be closer than we think.
Come here and have a look at these. These things here, Richard, are they the sort of thing that I should be finding in my trench?
You should be. These genuine medieval, late 13th century.
You see, the thing of it is that what we think is the outside wall of the building in my trench lines up over there. It doesn't line up through here. Does that mean to say these are not in their original position? They've been moved?
Yes, and they've been reduced in height because during the restoration in 1908 by Colonel Sal de la Terrière, he discovered this portion of arcade in that wall. And I can show you where it is. So if you look, if you imagine those two arches, although they're reduced in size, came out of this section of the wall.
So we would have a row of arches just like that, literally coming right the way back down through here.
Yeah, all the way through.
So if Phil's right, then we might have an aisle with an arcade running under the house. That would tie in quite nicely with the idea of a chapel at the end of an infirmary hall. So, pretty impressive work by Phil. But then Mick just has to go one better.
You getting anything, Paul?
Oh, yes, are we? Funny enough, there was very little in the soil as we got down.
Yeah.
As we were going down through it. Then once we got near the bottom there, and where Faye was troweling, there's what looks like a linear feature, and that came out of it. Now, that's the Cotswolds work, but that's the early stuff. That's pre-conquest. That's late 10th or 11th century.
Right.
And it's actually sticking out of a feature. We've got features in this trench.
Are we talking buildings or settlements or something like
I think it's a building. I mean, as a bonus, we got this out as well, which is a large lump of daub, which has been burnt, so possibly off a watland daub building or an oven.
Watland daub or an oven or something like that.
And a pig tooth as well.
Oh,
so it's starting to look like domestic refuse.
Well,
it
that's,
really
that's
is.
very good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Crikey.
There's possibly a couple of post holes down there. It's still being cleaned up. Faye's going to get it all sorted out, hopefully, in the near future.
This is fantastic news. Whisper it carefully, but this could be the first hint of an Anglo-Saxon house. And I can count on one hand the number of those we've ever found on Time Team.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what? Oh, look at that. Oh,
So
that's a
we've-
big lump of metalworking slag.
So we've got
Metalworking
possible timber
slag,
building.
Metalworking slag, possible piece of an oven dome.
Yeah.
Timber building.
Timber building, pottery,
Oh.
domestic food waste with the pig bone. It's only going to get better, isn't it?
Let's hope so.
It's only going to get better.
Our hospital could start just 50 years after the Saxon village ended. And instead of the two buildings, we could have just one. An early Norman chapel with a later arcade added on. So, great theory, guys. We just need to find one arcade.
So 2 metres.
67 from here.
2 metres
so it's
from
2
that.
metres from there.
Up until a few minutes ago, I thought this archaeology here was part of the 13th century hospital, which we know exists because of the history books. But now they've started looking at it closer, some of the archaeologists are starting to think that this stuff is older than anything we know about here. Maybe it's part of an earlier phase of the hospital which stretched back in this direction. And the only way to find out whether that hypothesis is true or not is to put in a big hole here, which is why Phil and John are doing this measuring, which is fine, that's their job as archaeologists, except look at this place. Never mind the tulips, that is a listed building. It's a Grade 1 listed building. You can't just slap in any old hole, 1.5 metres from the foundations, although they seem perfectly happy about it. I think somebody... Hey, hang on a minute, I'm talking to the camera.
Well, yeah, I know you are, but we're putting in a trench.
You're putting in a trench right by a Grade 1 listed building.
Yeah,
have you got permission to do that?
Yeah.
You haven't, that is
Yes,
not true.
you
you have
have.
no permission to do
Yes,
that
we
yet.
have.
He hasn't. Someone's
we
going to have to
have.
make some phone calls.
Yes, we
Don't say
have.
yes, we have, yes, we have. It's
See?
childish.
Yes, we have.
Since the filming of this programme, Phil's asked me to tell you that yes, he had. Or so he says. Over in the vegetable garden, which I hasten to add isn't Grade 1 listed, Faye's got a rare foundation trench for a timber Saxon house. It was definitely gone by 1100, but when was it built? It's hard to tell. The pottery from it could be as early as 450 AD, and we're also getting Roman stuff as well. To you and I, a bit of pot is a bit of pot, but to expert Paul Blinkhorn, this stuff is key to dating our site. Beginning of day 3, and things are quiet here at Burford Priory. Too quiet. 2 days ago, Mick promised me that he'd be able to tell the story of this place before we go home. But this big garden keeps throwing up more questions than we can answer. Yesterday afternoon, our archaeologists were really excited. They'd found this beautiful medieval hospital here. Just a few questions about its shape. Was it narrow or was it much fatter with 2 side aisles? In order to sort that out, they put in this highly controversial trench here, very close to the side of the house, and it proved absolutely inconclusive. This stonework here is just some garden feature or something, so that was a total waste of time. So have we got the 2 side aisles? Well, this appears to be one of them. It goes along here like that and then turns like that. This stuff in the middle here, that's just rubble. What about the other side aisle? Well, that ought to be where this light blue plastic is, but according to John's geophys, there doesn't seem to be anything there at all. So, Mick, have we got a wonky chapel with 1 side aisle?
Well, we might have. I mean, it might just have a north aisle, but we think we ought to look where the plastic is. Even though there's nothing on the geophysics, there might still be a robber trench that shows us that there was an aisle butted onto the chapel at that point.
Show me the nothing.
There's the corner of the chapel.
Yeah.
And there is nothing. So has it been robbed out? Did it ever exist? So that's where we want to look.
So, with 1 day left, we're quite literally digging for all or nothing. And it isn't just Phil who's going for broke. We've got to tie our hospital in the front to the Saxon village out back. So we're taking a leap of faith by opening a final trench inside the present-day chapel. Under the altar lies a strange block of stone. The more romantic of us think it could be a tomb. But Stuart suspects it might be the boundary wall of the medieval hospital, which follows the line of the old Saxon road. So that's the front. But what about the Roman wall in the back? We've now got a Roman coin from the same trench, but is everything what it seems?
So it's a Roman coin, but it's got 2 loops for fastening over a strap.
That's right, a strap.
That's very interesting because it's a very common early Anglo-Saxon practice to salvage Roman coins and mount them up as jewellery. So it supports the impression we're getting of an early Anglo-Saxon settlement here.
So are we looking at the Roman stuff the wrong way round, or are we just plain wrong? I hear that the story here has changed yet again.
It has, but it's not Roman.
It's not Roman?
No.
So you're absolutely right, but also absolutely wrong.
Afraid so, yeah.
Why are you so sure it isn't Roman now, where yesterday you were convinced it was?
Well, we've got this pit here that is Saxo-Norman.
Oh, I see. So this can't be Roman because the Saxons came after the Romans, so you couldn't have a Roman wall on top of a Saxon pit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Anything else?
And also, we've got this ironstone here that wasn't used as a building material to the late 1600s.
Well, that seems fairly conclusive, doesn't it? Paul Blinkhorn, world-famous authority on pop.
Hello.
It was Roman yesterday, this wall.
It was indeed Roman yesterday, but it's not anymore.
Well, at least we now know that our story begins with the Saxons in the area of the back garden. Faye, you still happy you've got an Anglo-Saxon house?
Definitely, without a shadow.
And do we know the date?
Yeah, there's a few more rather scruffy bits of pottery coming out of the beam slots, but I don't see any reason to sort of change the dating from yesterday.
Which is what?
Middle Saxon.
Dates?
650 to 850.
Can you show me your house?
I am, if you follow me. We're now in the entrance of the house.
Yeah.
And so what we've got down here is a beam slot.
So that's one wall there.
That's one wall.
Faye. What's this thing here?
This is a pit. It's had pottery, it had bone in, and probably from when they constructed the building, they put a load of stuff in.
All right.
So if we walk this way,
Yeah.
we've got another pit here, which is actually where I got a load of animal bone. And this could possibly be like the hearth area, where they had their final meal before they scarpered.
Yeah.
And then if we keep walking down this way to here, this is the end of our house.
It's pretty small, isn't it?
It is, but it's cosy.
Our Saxon house is a little gem. We hardly ever find timber buildings as old as this one. The small village it belonged to was founded sometime after 650 AD, before vanishing around 1100. Take it away, Mr. Storyteller.
So you know where your school is, you know where the river is, you know where the main road is up the middle of the town, OK? First bit of the story we can't put on here. You found Roman pottery. We don't know where the Roman site is. The bit you also found was lots of Saxon pottery. And we now think there's a Saxon settlement, Saxon village somewhere here. My lovely assistant, Stuart, Debbie McGee of the Archaeological World, will put on a little Saxon building, right? And that lasts from about 400 AD right through to about 1100 AD. And then sometime after 1100, they build the new town down the main street. That's where your houses come in. So take the Saxon village away, because everybody's moved into the town, right?
The village goes away.
And then all down the main street, build the houses.
Put your two there.
Leave a gap here.
Yeah.
For the house.
Pass them up, there we go.
Do on the other end like that, look.
Here we are, mate.
Well, they can put them on there,
No,
look.
the ones at the back couldn't reach.
I can only reach so far. There we go.
More houses, mate.
Oh, it's filling up with new people, this town, isn't it?
All over, isn't it? Oh, the chimney's fallen off.
Once the town is built, the hospital, which is on this site, where the poor people and the sick people were looked after, was built next to your school. And that then went on right the way through to about the time of the Tudors, when that was taken down, and on the site was built the beginnings of this big house here.
Yeah.
So there it is. And that's more or less as it is today, isn't it? Big house at the Priory, the parish church and the town all laid out along the street. So we've just looked at over 1,000 years of history.
Burford's got talent.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Want us to make more episodes? Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. And you get to have your say in the process as we develop new sites.
The village of Sutton, Courtenay lies 2 miles south of the Thames in Oxfordshire. And in the 1920s, an amazing discovery was made in the surrounding fields. The first Anglo-Saxon settlement ever to be identified in the British Isles. Since then, archaeologists have explored all over Sutton, Courtenay, but they've never been given permission to dig in this field, where the crop marks suggest the most exciting archaeology lies. Now, we've been given the opportunity to investigate this archaeological holy grail. Mick, I don't understand. Usually by this time, the three of us are around a 4x4 in a field, we discuss the site, and only then do you tell geophirs where to go. Well, they're already all over the site and you haven't even spoken to them yet.
Yeah, but that's because we've got this fantastic air picture with all these crop marks on it already. We can almost see where we think the archaeology is.
What can you see?
There are a number of circles which may well be ploughed out barrows, but then in amongst that, can you see these little rectangles? They look like Anglo-Saxon halls, which would be really exciting.
This is not like you. You're normally the sceptical black country man. All we've got is circles and lines. This has never been dug. Why are you so confident that what we've got is what you say we've got?
These type of marks on crop marks turn out to be sites of that period when they're excavated. Most interesting of this, of course, is the Anglo-Saxon complex up in this area here.
Well, if it's Anglo-Saxon, it's Helen Geek, isn't it?
Yeah, and Helen's a great expert on the Anglo-Saxon period, and I'm going to defer to Helen on this one. I'm going to hand over the responsibility to her.
Great expert.
Well, actually, you know, I did my first ever undergraduate essay on Anglo-Saxon settlement in this area, so being given the chance to excavate in this field is the most exciting thing I can imagine.
So it may be big, but our first trench has gone in over some great geophys. And to prove it's an Anglo-Saxon hall, we either need to find post holes, the remains of massive wooden uprights which supported the walls and roof, or beam slots, the remains of the alternative Anglo-Saxon building method, large planks of wood set in the ground. And as Phil gets stuck in to see if he can find either of these features, we've already made a reassuring discovery.
I'm as certain as you can be with a bit of pottery that big that that's probably early Saxon, so it could do with some bigger
I think
bits.
a lot of us would be amazed you could even pronounce that it's pottery.
Well, it's just a matter of eliminating what it can't be, you know what I mean? And I think you've got a bit of Saxon pottery here, Phil. There's one probable and one maybe.
Well, one piece of pot in the topsoil doesn't equal a hall, but at least it proves the Anglo-Saxons were here. Beginning of day 2 here at Sutton, Courtenay in Oxfordshire, and look at that geophys. Looks like there's archaeology all over the place, and it seems to be borne out in this trench. You see all those different colours there? We reckon we may have prehistoric, Anglo-Saxon, even that rarest of all commodities in British archaeology, an Anglo-Saxon Great Hall. So, this being Time Team, what are we going to do today? We're going to dig somewhere else. We're not only putting in another little trench in the corner of the field where we're looking for an Anglo-Saxon grub hut, but Helen has left the field altogether and is digging on the far side of the fence.
That's because we really need to find out what the context of that great big building over there is.
What do you mean by context?
Well, I mean, did it stand on its own, or was it part of a complex? And if you look on this aerial photograph, you can see that we've got lots more of these rectangular buildings, and we're putting a trench in on the edge of this one up here to see what its constructional details are like. I mean, to see if it's got a relationship to our big one over here. Could they have been standing at the same time?
Because if they were all standing at the same time, then we might have something really big, an estate or something.
Yeah, and that's when you'd start using words like maybe royalty or kings.
That's very romantic, and, you know, let's hope that we find an enormous palace. But looking at the geophys, this is where you think the Anglo-Saxon hall is, right?
That's right.
We've got a blob here.
Yeah.
Is that another one of your grub huts?
Well, we're hoping it might be a Grubenhaus, yes. And what we're hoping is we'll be able to get the relationship between the Grubenhaus and the hall, which is potentially on top of it. Because one might have succeeded the other.
Because then we might have a story of Anglo-Saxons coming here and living in relative poverty, and only later on does this become a royal site.
Exactly, and then you have to ask why.
From rags to riches. So, on Helen's orders, the team gets stuck into our latest trench. Because if the crop marks deliver, we're dealing with 2 more Anglo-Saxon buildings, another grub hut and another hall. 2 phases of occupation, but most excitingly of all, we might have a huge royal estate. In our first trench, we're already hoping we've got a massive great hall, and so far it's looking good. We've got these walls, and this morning, Phil's extending the trench to expose the other corner.
Or...
Mate. Now then, I think that's pottery. That's a bit of daub.
Ah, now then.
Where's it from?
Wow, it's bang on line with the war trench.
Yep.
That could be what the building's made out of.
Well, I mean, it's not unusual to expect to find wattle and daub construction. I mean, it's one of the classic sort of timber building techniques. You put your posts in, you put interwoven panels of withies, wattle, between them. Then you get this mixture of sand, clay and cow dung, and you plaster it onto the outside, let it dry, and then whitewash it.
So maybe we've got our first piece of structural evidence for this building, which is great, because while we've exposed lots of features in the trench, at the moment they're just stains in the ground. We now need to dig down into each of them to get some dates and confirm whether these walls and post holes are the remains of one truly massive Anglo-Saxon hall or several different buildings from different periods.
Mick,
You get very, very few Anglo-Saxon finds. All you get really is stains in the ground.
Yep.
And yet there's at least half a dozen people here who are all dewy-eyed about Anglo-Saxon archaeology.
Yeah.
Why?
Probably because we've got so little of it. But we haven't got really quite enough to explain everything.
It's now mid-afternoon, day 2, and it seems patience is a virtue, because at last we're beginning to get a more personal glimpse of the Anglo-Saxons.
That's lovely, isn't it? It's an antler comb, or a bit of an antler comb, because they're made in lots of bits and then riveted together, and you can actually see the rivet hole there.
Because I thought it seemed to be a really clean rake is what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, it's been made separately, and it's got fine teeth on one side and coarse teeth on the other, which is lovely. And it's a brilliant classic find for a sunken featured building. It seems like every sunken featured building has got at least one antler comb in it. It seems like everybody needed to comb their hair or their beard.
Well, not everyone, Helen, but grooming aside, we might actually have our first Anglo-Saxon grub hut. And what's more, we're finally getting to grips with the hall.
That is amazingly deep, isn't it?
Yeah.
Charlotte, have you got to the bottom of that yet?
Yeah, I think I'm just on the bottom now.
So it's half a metre deep or more, isn't it? And that's just the side wall, Tracy, that we're looking at, isn't it? That's the foundations for the side wall of the hall.
Yeah, that's right. That's the northern end wall that way.
So it's a hell of a size.
It is, but I suppose you have got to have something that is that deep in order to support these mighty great timbers that are going up to support the roof.
I mean, the scale of that seems very different to these posts, which are presumably inside the building, aren't they, behind you here?
Yeah, and these are internal posts, so they're not going to be supporting the sort of weight and structure that the external wall.
So that's pretty much confirmed that, hasn't it? That they definitely are internal posts.
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And
This trench gives a real sense of just how massive these walls would have been. And since the post holes are internal, we know that we're dealing with just one building. Beginning of day 3 here at Sutton, Courtenay in Oxfordshire, and we've got it. Our very first Anglo-Saxon Great Hall, and it's enormous. But in addition to that, late yesterday afternoon, Paul Blinkhorn, our pottery expert, came up with evidence of something just as rare and even more bizarre, a pair of totem poles. Paul, are you serious?
I think we can make a good case for it, yeah. If you look at the excavation of some of the high-status Saxon sites in the past, like Yevering and Cheddar, they found one of two of these enormous post holes. I mean, we're talking about things like a metre deep. They weren't structural, they weren't part of a building. They've got to be some sort of display thing. I could certainly see a huge pillar covered in sort of symbols relating to the social identity and power of the people there.
Helena, have you looked at this section? I think it's an absolutely cracking section. You can actually see the outline of the post in there. And the post, well, you can actually see more or less how big the post would have been, and it would fill the foundation trench. It's an arrangement, a deliberate arrangement around these raking posts. Look, you've got one here, this one here. Now, it's not a vertical post, it's actually slanting like that to support the wall plate. So you've got a raking post and a raking post, and then a big post in there in the middle. And if I'm right, we can start building that picture going all the way around. I reckon there's another big post in there. And how do I know that? Because we've actually got bits of chalk. And everywhere else we've had chalk, we've had a post.
Yep.
So we got one in there and another raking post. There's a bit of a gap in here. But we got chalk there.
Yep.
So I reckon we got another post there. Raking post, vertical post, raking post, upright post.
Let me guess, Phil. Another post?
Upright post. Masses of chalk.
But this isn't the only hall we think we've got on this site. The crop marks suggest there are 4 more. Yesterday we opened a trench and it looked like these are halls, which could make this a royal site. But the archaeologists aren't satisfied yet.
Look, we've done the detailed survey now, and I think what it clarifies is we don't have any entrances on the side walls of this building.
So that's not an entrance?
No. That's not.
It's our last day. We've only got enough metres left to dig one more trench. We know we want to put it in somewhere around here, but frankly, we've had so little datable evidence so far that we want to make sure we put it in somewhere that's potentially really fruitful. The question is where?
You have, but I can see the argument for this because I think we've got a very clear question about this particular building and we're not going to answer it without going a little bit further in this direction. So I think, yeah, there's a very good case for extending this trench.
So the team begin to extend the trench to uncover more of the hall, hopefully find the entrance, and construct a picture of how it was built. But we're not only interested in the Anglo-Saxon buildings, we also want to find out about the people. And luckily, we've just got our first really personal glimpse of one of them.
What have you got there then?
Well, just found that in the spoil.
Ooh.
Oh. Oh, that is fantastic.
Isn't that nice?
Yes, that is a 9th century strap end. They're a really characteristic shape with these kind of convex edges, and they do often fall off because they're on the end of a really narrow belt or strap. And 9th century, it doesn't fit in really with the date that we've been thinking for the rest of the site, which is largely 7th century. But this could simply have come from somebody walking across a field 200 years later.
So, nice find, but unfortunately, Helen thinks the strap end was just a casual loss, so it won't date our buildings. And as Matt's got to the bottom of his post hole, it's not the only date which is slightly surprising.
What's this about Roman? Oh, that looks Roman, doesn't it? Yeah.
So, not an Anglo-Saxon totem pole then, Paul. And heaven knows what the Romans were doing here. But over in the Gruben house, the Anglo-Saxons are beginning to make sense.
Is that a dog skull you found there, Faye?
Yes, it is. Here, have a look.
Is that what we'd expect?
Yeah, we think that they might be part of some kind of closure ritual, that when the building went out of use, depositing skulls, sometimes bits of animals, sometimes even bits of people, was part of the kind of ritual associated with the building going out of use, kind of ending its life in a way.
We are standing in the sunken future building.
A grub to me.
A grub. And if we come over here, basically what they did is they put a big hall over the top of it. So we've got a wall here, and it goes through where you're standing. And
then out and returning back through there.
Yeah. Where you are right now is our entranceway.
And then the building is running straight back through that way, is it?
Yeah,
It's aligned this way.
Yep.
So the doorway is, again, in the end and not in the side.
So brilliantly, it does seem we've got two phases of Anglo-Saxons, who first lived here in grub huts as a small community, which then grew as they were replaced with a series of halls. Since this hall is very much like the Great Hall, we think it's contemporary, proving that this was a royal site. It's a pretty exciting piece of archaeology, isn't it?
It is absolutely fantastic. We've got the end of one wall there, we've got the end of another wall there. In between is this great big elaborate entrance, and once you've come through the gable wall, you walk into the hall. We've got a wall there and a wall there, and you've got to imagine them going right up to the ridge. We've got maybe 7 metres up there. And look at the scale of it. I mean, can you imagine the size of fire you would need to heat this huge space? Would have been just absolutely, literally awesome. Now, look, these are rough plans of hitherto the largest buildings from Anglo-Saxon England, both from Yevering in Northumberland. Now, this one is ours, and look, it is substantially bigger.
And we dug it up.
We did.
What a result. 3 days, and we've got a whole Anglo-Saxon royal riverside complex. And not just one hall, but possibly the biggest great hall the Anglo-Saxons ever built.
Whoever would have thought that at the end of day 3 we would be sitting inside an Anglo-Saxon Great Hall?
Well, I thought this was going to be a great site, but honestly, it's exceeded all my expectations.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses, and more. Please join us on this exciting journey. We need more support to make more episodes.
30 years ago, the Legg family took over this farm in West Dorset. Almost immediately, they discovered that one end of this field was difficult to plough, and they put it down to the stony soil. But then, earlier this year, Roman finds started to crop up all over the field. Roof tile, pottery, Roman coins, brooches. What's going on? The Leggs are itching to know. Is there a Roman building here that could account for their broken ploughs? Time Team's got just 3 days to find out and let them know.
OK, what have you got then, Henry?
This is basically a map plotting where all the previous metal detecting finds have been in this field. And basically we have the red dots showing the coins, we've got the brooches, the yellow triangles, and the ring at that end. And it does show a cluster, sort of where we stood, roughly.
So it sounds as if, in the absence of a geophys target, we probably ought to have a look at that concentrated area in the middle there, shouldn't we?
So, yeah.
Mick seems very relaxed given all this bad news, and everyone's putting on a brave face.
I would have thought.
But the truth is, we're sticking in a trench on a broad scatter of metal detectorist finds, and outside the geophys survey area. I wonder if our spectators have got any idea of how close to disaster we are.
Could be, couldn't it?
Our Roman double act, Guy and Richard, have been looking at what kind of Roman coins have been found to see if the dates and values give us any clues as to why they were here. Do we reckon we know what we've got now?
Yep, quite a few coins.
Yes, I know we've got coins. Even I know we've got coins. What kind of date?
Early 2nd, speeding up in the 3rd, quite a lot of 4th century stuff.
Are they valuable?
In ancient terms, no.
So what does that imply?
You'd either use them for everyday purchase on market stalls or fairgrounds or something like that and not worry if you lost them, or if you're giving them to a shrine or something, the tendency is always to give the worst stuff, the copies, the forgeries, the foreign coins.
What about the other metal finds?
Well, there's some brooches, some of which may be as early as the 1st century, and one that goes up to the middle of the 2nd century, but look that it's broken. Now, it's quite common in a religious context to give away broken brooches. Just as you might give away worn-out rubbish coinage, you give away scrap metal rather than good stuff.
So lots of finds but no structure?
Yeah, we've got a real mystery. The coins are great, the brooches are great. It's a very, very strange place.
What do you think it might be?
Well, you could have coins and no living both on a fairground or a temple.
A fairground?
Yeah, market.
What Phil thinks he's got is a man-made ditch cut into the natural geology. He's found one edge, and to confirm it, he needs to find the other one.
Oh,
Nice one.
that's the other side of it then.
Nice one.
That is, I like the look of that.
Yeah.
It's curving round, it's curving round.
Hallelujah, there is some archaeology here. We now have 2 edges to our ditch.
Is you've got the natural there, natural bedrock there, this stuff, and you see there's an edge. Comes across there, and it's coming across there as well. So there's summit going round there, that way.
The question now is, what is it? It's a mystery that's going to keep us busy for a while.
Oh, you mean you got Roman stuff?
Look, we've got church.
Yeah.
That's the local equivalent of the flint, the actual green sand church.
See the bulb there.
That's right. And we've got flint itself, which really does begin to make it look as though it is prehistoric.
Yep.
But if you really wanted evidence, Bronze Age pot, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I'd agree with that. That looks like sort of good early Middle Bronze Age. Exactly what you'd expect with a ring ditch like this. Which
that's right. I mean,
we're certainly going to turn into a barrow. Yeah, that's perfect. Excellent.
Not a Roman in sight.
Excuse me while I just pummel you.
If they're right and this is a barrow, then Phil's found part of a ditch that ringed a man-made mound, in the middle of which may be a burial. If that's the case, we'd expect the ditch to extend into the next field, where geophys and the field walkers have been looking for Roman stuff. Just outside the ditch, Matt has been exploring an area where detectorists have found a cluster of coins. And it's produced something rather interesting. Matt, you see I've got this kind of black circle thing here.
Yeah. I think we should get a metal detector or something over them.
Can we borrow you for a minute?
Spread that out a bit. Ah.
Hey!
There you go.
A find. Oh, beautiful.
Absolutely
find. Mark!
Well, it's going to be either late 3rd or 4th century AD.
How do you know that?
The size and thickness alone, that's enough to give a good indication.
So what are all these Roman coins doing in a prehistoric site? Even though everyone's bottling up their feelings, it's been a tense and frustrating day for the archaeologists. Nerves are beginning to fray, particularly when one of the crew steps into Phil's newly cleaned trench.
David! Sorry, sir.
And on the other side of the hedge, the hunt for the all-important centre of the barrow is also proving frustrating. No one can agree where it is.
I'll paste it and I think that's where the centre is.
K for Kerry?
Yeah.
Not a chance. We'll mark the perimeter and we'll see who's right.
Well, I'm going to extend it from the trench bit. And
oh, you do what you want.
This site gets more and more peculiar. On day 1, we thought we got a Roman temple. Day 2, we thought we got a classic Bronze Age burial mound. Now, Mick thinks it's something entirely different. What? We'll find out tomorrow. Beginning of day 3, and not content with putting a huge trench in all the way over here and extending it all the way down there, not to mention 2 huge trenches on the other side of that hedge, Mick's gone trench crazy, and you're extending the whole thing over here. What's going on?
We've got some geophys anomalies here.
What do they look like?
They're just blobs on it, but given that that is looking very interesting and exciting now, we've got to spend the whole day looking at it. We've got to look at this as well to go with it.
What do you reckon it is?
I've no idea. I just feel in my water that it's going to be very significant.
You're a professor, you ought to be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I think we're back in prehistory here, and that's, you know, we need some specialists. I mean, Miles is our man for this, without any doubt.
We've left the first field behind. All our efforts are now in the second field, investigating the barrow and the geophys blobs. They might be an entrance, which would be unusual in a standard Bronze Age barrow. It's one of a number of puzzles that have got the archaeologists scratching their heads about this monument.
OK, right, Matt, if we can get a nice sort of metre section through that charcoal, that would be absolutely brilliant. Okay.
Unlike most Bronze Age round barrows, our barrow isn't circular, as Henry revealed. And after his bombshell, we double-checked the middle area in case there was a burial there. But no, and no burials anywhere else either. And our puzzling monument seems to have had a palisade as well.
So we've got the ditch swinging around here.
Our army of diggers have got just one day of scraping and shoveling left to find out what this prehistoric thing is. Encouragingly, there are plenty of finds. One that may be very significant has got Phil in raptures.
Look at that profile, where that curves down there. Classic scraper shape, that is. That ain't just a 5-minute job, that's beautiful workmanship. I mean, that's got to be late Neolithic, early Bronze Age, I'd have thought. Really?
Amazingly, to an expert like Phil, a stone tool can be dating evidence. The trimming on this scraper suggests skilled craftsmanship from the Neolithic or Stone Age.
Perfect thing for holding in your hand.
These skills were largely lost in the Bronze Age when metal replaced stone tools. It may add yet another 1,000 years to our monument, and that would definitely account for the odd features. What have you got?
Well, he's just finding all these tools here.
Cool.
Look at them all. I mean, he's got this one here. Wonderful thing.
It's a scraper. He used to scrape off hides and things like that.
There's this one here.
That's another scraping edge.
He's found this one here. There's all sorts of things. They've also found some pottery in here. Absolutely brilliant stuff. This one here. You could have a thumb decoration there or a lug that's fallen off.
What kind of period do you reckon this is?
Well, I'd go for Bronze Age, but very early Bronze Age. Maybe transitional.
I think you're probably about right, and I think one of a really good key indicator that sort of provoked discussion is from this piece of pottery here. It's a rim, and it's got whipcord decoration.
What do you mean by that?
Well, can you see here? You've got like a piece of string has been pressed into the wet clay before it was dried.
The string decoration would have been applied before this massive collared urn was fired, about 4,000 years ago. The field archaeologists are starting to say that they reckon this might not be just a plain old Bronze Age site, that it might be very early Bronze Age or on the cusp of Bronze Age and Neolithic, or even Neolithic. What do you reckon?
It's Neolithic, without a shadow of a doubt.
Why do you say that?
Well, based on the actual shape of the monument and the artefacts coming out of it, it is very clearly all late Neolithic.
Do we know much about these Neolithic people?
Well, we're really dealing with the first agriculturalists, the first farmers, the first builders of monuments in the Neolithic. Prior to the Neolithic, we just got sort of hunters and gatherers, not really having much of an impact, but the Neolithic farmers are the first people who start building things, big monuments in the landscape, cutting down trees, ploughing fields.
What sort of date?
Well, it dates from around about 4000 BC. So our monument's at the tail end of it, it's about 3000 BC.
Can we work out anything about them as people?
We can. Actually finding the skeletal evidence is often quite rare. We find bits of bodies, but we don't find complete individuals. And that might be what our monument is. It might be a place where bodies are left to decompose and then selected pieces are taken away for burial elsewhere.
Do you find many monuments like this around here?
Not around here, no. So this is actually quite rare. It fills in a nice gap in our Neolithic map.
We appear to have lurched more than 3,000 years back in time since we arrived at the site.
Ian, look at this. I think I might have another piece of pottery, but I'm not sure actually what it is. It's very dirty.
Oh no, I don't think it's pot, it's daub. Look, that's where the hazel rug went through.
Of course it is.
Wattle daub.
That's absolutely brilliant, because yesterday we had some burnt daub up that end there.
There you go. It's the
That's
house.
very nice.
We've got the house.
Wattle and daub was made by weaving hazel rods together and then daubing them with a mix of mud, straw and dung. Our daub may have been part of the palisade around the monument. Phil's post holes suggested a circle of timbers, and in between there may have been wattled hurdle, making it continuous. And this structure would be more typically Neolithic than Bronze Age. This site has produced one of the biggest range of finds we've ever seen on Time Team. From 5,000-year-old Neolithic chert tools to 500-year-old medieval coins, there's something from every period. And together they've unlocked the secrets of this site. We came here looking for a Roman temple, and instead found what we thought was a classic Bronze Age barrow. But it's now clear that our thing began its life in the Neolithic about 5,000 years ago, as an enclosure ringed by a ditch and quite possibly by a palisade which was later burnt. The enclosure may have been used to display dead bodies. Tools and pottery were also deposited in two sections of the ditch. In the Bronze Age, a mound was thrown up using material dug from quarry pits just outside the ring ditch. The mound was probably still visible in the Roman period, and local people passing by were moved to bury their coins next to it, which is where we came in.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.